I'm Allie. Join me as I design and create a second colorway for this Hope Pendant. It's using Potomac's metal beads to make it look really luxurious and very much like a jeweler's piece. If you need any materials, don't forget to look below the video in the description to find links to shop with us online. Gather up all your materials and your bead on it board and let's get started. So for this Hope Pendant, we are going to be using some Potomax Ginko beads. So they're this nice Ginko leaf shape, and we're going to be using 7 of those to create our bezel around our 18mm Rivoli, using a netting method to hold in the Rivoli and create that bezel along the back. I'm going to be using an 18mm Potomac Crystal Rivoli, and that's in the Siam AB color, which gives a nice bright pink pop, along with some silver-lined Duracoat Orchid in the Miyuki 80 seed beads, some 6mm Bicones. You can use round beads too if you have those instead. It's just a little bit of a different look. And that I'm using the light Sapphire AB, along with some 15 O's to match my Potomac's metal Ginkos, and these are in the Crystal Lab Fool. I'm using a size 12 needle with some white Dragonthread in the 0.006mm. I have about 3 feet of thread and a stop bead at the end of my thread. I'm going to pick up my first of my 7 Ginko beads, and I'm going to go from the outer edge of the leaf towards the middle. Pick up 1 of my 80 seed beads, and then pick up my next Ginko bead going from the interior toward the exterior. At the top of the Ginko bead, add a 15, an 8, and a 15 onto your needle. Go back into that same Ginko, the second hole, going from the outside toward the inside point, and give a nice little tight pull. From here, you're going to repeat this same exact process a total of 7 times, going in and adding an 80, then your Ginko from the small side toward the larger side. From the rounded outer edge then, add 3 beads of 15 and 8 of 15, and go back through the Ginko toward the point. You can see that it's going to sit a little funky. Don't worry about that. As we go in and create the design then, we'll make sure that it sits correct as we round it out into that shape for our bezel. So I'm going to continue here. I have 4 on now, pulling that thread through, and I have 3 more to add, and then I'm going to come together and join the ends. Once those 7 Ginkos are on, we're going to join the 1st and the 7th. So I'm going to pick up an 80 seed bead, come back to the first side. So my thread is currently coming out of that 7th one. I'm going to go back to the first side from the point toward the top and join those 2 ends together. Like I said, it's going to sit funky. Don't worry about that. We need to decorate the top here with our 15, 8, 15, down through that same Ginko bead. And then I'm going to go through the 80 that's already there and up through the next Ginko. Anytime you're rounding out a project or making it into a circle, it's always nice to go back through the first set or the first beads that you put on as you're going in and making that rounded loop. Now you can see it wants to sit a little bit twisted. Go ahead and we're going to force that to open up and sit, because that's going to be the front of our design. From here then, what we're going to do is we are going to let this relax ever so slightly, and we're going to get our thread and needle up to the point here. Along the back of the design, we are going to, so here's the front, that's what's sitting down facing. We're going to go in the back here and we're going to add in a little peak of seed beads to use in a netting to act as our bezel to hold everything in place. Take your needle and thread and make sure that you're exiting through one of the 80 seed beads at the top of the design. From there, you can see the 80 seed beads are starting to pop out on the top of those Ginko beads. We're going to be catching on to each one of those top 80 seed beads when we're adding 5 15-Os, 1 80, and 5 more 15-Os. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 15s, followed by 1 80 seed bead, followed by 5 more 15s. After you have those on, we're going to go over to the next 8-0 seed bead and sew through. Once again, 5 seed beads on, 8-0, 5 15s, and then on to the next 8. When you're going around the circle, just make sure that as you repeat this 7 times, catching onto the top of all of these, that you're not skipping any of your Ginko beads, since usually 1 or 2 of them want to lay down in the design. So go ahead, I have 2 done. Go ahead and finish up with 5 more of those seed beads, and then we're going to get ready to come out the top of one of these that we're adding in. As we're adding in the last of our beads here, I'm going to sew through those first 5 15-0s as well as through the first 8-0 that I added in that first little fringe section. So now all of my Ginkgos are connected. I'm going to start connecting now those little peaks or those little points that I made along the exterior in between the Ginko beads. To connect them, we're going to use 115, 1/8, 115, and then sew over to the next one. So again, we have 7 points on this, so it's going to be repeated 7 times, 15, 8, 15, onto the next 8-0 seed bead. 15, 8, 15, onto the next point. So not the one that sits on top of the gecko, the one that sits in between them. After you have 4 or so on, you're going to want to take your Rivoli, face it down, because this is going to be the back of the design. So I'm going 15, 8, 15, onto the next center 8-0 to create this super simple, easy netting. So around and around we go. Once again, we're going to repeat this 7 times. And then we're going to reinforce this netting that we're doing by going back through all of the beads that we're currently adding. So the current thread line here, we're going to repeat back through that again. So I have 1 more to add here. Going into that same bead then, I'm going to go through the 15, 8, 15, as well as through the next 8 from that top point and out. All right, now what I'm going to do is give a nice tight pull, and you can see how that creates a nice star shape and sits pretty perfectly along the back. Once again, as we're doing this, any time that you have something that is bezeled in, it's always good practice to go back around the design for a second piece of thread, because it really, really does pull that tightly together. I sewed through one of the 15s there. Don't want to do that. I'm just doing the 15s that I just added and back through the 8 that I sewed around and sewed through. So I'm going to keep going around, reinforcing this, so I have 2 pieces of thread around each one of those sections. As you go around the back then and finish up, you're going to be back into that starting 8-0 seed bead that you added the 15, 8, 15 to, and then I want you to make sure that you reinforce that whole entire line going back through all of that. From there, after that reinforcement, once again, you're going to go back up through the 5 seed beads that sit after the 8-0. So remember that little 5, 1, 5 that we did? You're going back up to the 5. Then you're going to go through the 8-0 that sits on the top of the Ginko, as well as the 15-0 that sits right after it. That 15-0 is the first bead in that set of 5 along the back. So your 2 15-0s from the original start of the 8 are still going to sit to the front. From here, we're going to pick up a 15, a 6mm crystal. I'm using a bicone, but you can also use a round, and then following by another 15. Going over to the next Ginko, sew through the 15, 8, 15 that sit at the top there. Again, it's not the 15 that sits right on top of the Ginko. It's the first bead and the last bead next to the 8-0 from that grouping of our 5 seed beads. And you can see that fits pretty perfectly in there. Going around then, 15, 6, 15, over to that next top point, through the 15, 8, 15, and around. So I have 2 on. Once again, we are going the whole way around the circle, and because we used 7 beads, we get to repeat this, you guessed it, 7 times. So we're going around here, going the whole way. I have 3 done. I'm going to do 4 more as I add in those nice big 6mm bicones that really become an accent to that inside crystal. As you're adding in the last of your 6mm bicones here, you're going to go back through the 15, 8, 15, and then go back through your first 15 and your first 8mm crystal. I'm going to go over to the second one that I added, just once again for a little bit more strength and durability. I always like to go past the point of the start whenever I'm doing an outer row. You can see how pretty that is, and that blue just really pulls out nicely that little bit of blue pop from the Siam AB. From here, we are going to do our bail. Now, if you want to, you can do a wire guard, you can do a jump ring. I did a hidden bail that sits behind the top bicone, or one of the bicones. And we're going to be utilizing our 15-0 seed beads for that. So I'm going to add some 15-0s here. And we're going to take our needle and thread, make sure we're coming out of one of the bicones. From here, I want to add 9 seed beads. So there's 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 15-0s. Go into the other side of that same bicone. So the seed beads are going to wrap around the top. From here, sew through beads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm sewing through those first 6 seed beads, so not through the last 2. Go ahead and add 3 more 15-0s and pick up those middle 3 15s that you're just exiting through, beads 4, 5, and 6. I'm coming out to the left of them. I add 3 beads and I sew into the right of them, doing a ladder stitch here. Going now back through those same 3 beads, and then once again adding 3 more. Once those 3 beads get added, I'm coming out the right side of those last 3 beads. I add the 3 beads and I'm going to go into the left side of those 3 beads so that they sit right on top. From here, go back through the 3 that you just added. You can make this bail as big as you need it to be. If you're putting it on leather or cord or chain, I really like it on chain because I think it makes it look really, like I said, that kind of high-end jewelry look. Putting 3 more seed beads on. Going into the opposite side of the 3 beads my thread is currently coming out of, back through those 3 that I just added, and now I'm going to turn this to the back of the design, so it's going to kind of disappear along the back. I'm going to the back of the design here, and my thread is coming out through the right-hand side of those 3 seed beads. Go down to the 8-0 seed bead that sits right below that 6mm crystal, and I'm going to sew through the left side, which the thread is currently on, over to the right. Go back through then, after coming out that crystal, the 3 seed beads that your thread was originally coming out of, from the right towards the left. And that's going to turn that down along the back. Back through that 8-0 again. Back through the 3 beads again. This is the nice thing about that dragon thread. I'm able to go through these 15-0s multiple times because it's a little bit thinner for the durability. Back through that 8, and now you have that bail hiding along the back that you won't see as it sits against your chest. Another idea, when Nathan saw it, he said that would be a pretty fun ring, which I thought was a fun idea. The last thing I want to do is get my thread and needle back to the spot where I can tie the 2 thread ends off together. So I'm going to reinforce this loop by going back through the 15s that sit along the side here. Taking my thread and needle along the edges, getting back toward that Ginko, where the thread is started, just sewing along the line, making sure you're not showing any extra thread, going down through the beads here, through that bead, through the 8. And then once I'm out this 8mm bead, I'm going to hop down into that C bead, and then my thread ends are right next to one another. Because of the size of the thread, I'm really not going to see the knots that will get created. So I'm just going to remove that stop bead, tie my 2 thread ends together, grab my thread burner, and burn that thread down to finish up the pendant. Again, I can just take a piece of chain, go right through that loop like I did in my sample piece, and it creates a nice little bail along the front of a chain pendant to finish up this beautiful Hope pendant. Thanks so much for joining me in this design. Remember, if you ever need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the description for the links to shop with us online. Don't forget to share your feedback in the comments and let us know any changes that you may make and really help out this Potomac Beaders community at large. As always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next inspiring video.